right?
Yeah, in Lincoln. It's like great. It's really encouraging.
Yeah.
I was watching it before and they were running some horrible offense. Like Nebraska guys were taking step back jumpers and
Yeah, they're just not
Fred
playing
Hoiberg.
well.
I just think Nebraska's a mess, as they proved to us on Saturday. Well, it looks like we are off and running here. The live stream is going. Indiana basketball did their job on Saturday. There were 11 or 12-point favorites, depending on when you got in on Saturday afternoon. And although Indiana got hit in the chin early, they survived, took a punch, bounced back, and sealed control of the game on Saturday. So IU's now 7-1. So it's just outside the top 25. And now the Hoosiers head to the House of Horrors up north in Madison, Wisconsin, to try to win there for the first time in 24 years. But first, we're going to talk about the changes in the IU football program after a nightmare 2-10 season. There's a new offensive coordinator in town. We're going to talk about Walt Bell and so much more here on episode 229 of the Hoosier Sound, where we are the official podcast of Indiana HQ. Tonight is December 7th, 2021. Happy Pearl Harbor Day. I'm here with my normal co-host, Matt Lukens. Matt, you were not expecting that. How are you doing on this Tuesday night? And before we get to the basketball, which we will a little bit later, let's talk about Walt Bell. New offensive coordinator Nick Sheridan is out. The Hoosiers have not made an official announcement, but you can expect one imminently. Talk to me about your thoughts on the direction of the IU football program this offseason.
Yeah, when I first heard the news, I was like, okay, who? Because I didn't know Walt Bell's name off the top of my head. Look, I know a lot about sports.
Yeah.
Walt Bell was not one of those people that I had known about before previously, had heard about, acknowledged his existence. And when I looked into who Walt Bell was and what Walt Bell has done, I'm not going to mince my words. I'm severely disappointed in this hire. Underwhelmed would be
understatement.
An understatement. Yeah. I think this is by far the worst hire I've seen at IU since I've been covering this team, and that includes promoting Sheridan. I don't get how this guy is going to be successful here, and it's not because I'm not going to give him a shot, and it's not because he went 2-13 or 2-23 or whatever his record was at UMass. That's not why. He is a run style offense. Everywhere he's gone, the offense has gotten worse under him. And he's coming into a program that has problems with an offensive line. We've had running backs transfer. We have a QB change. I don't see where he's going to improve the roster at all. He's not going to be bringing. He's not like the guy at Western Kentucky, right? Came over from Houston Baptist, brought Bailey Zappi, right? And you're going to see this a lot in college football this year, where somebody's going to leave a program, go to somewhere else, and bring somebody with him that's going to transfer. That's very much a thing that's going to happen. We don't want anybody from UMass, like anyone associated with that program. That is by far the worst Division I FBS school, maybe ever. They are that bad. So I don't see how we're gonna fix next year. I don't see how he's not even that promising me for the future. Apparently he can recruit. I've looked at his recruiting profile, what he was the lead recruiter on in the past. Not promising either. So to be honest, I'm about as low on this hire as you possibly could be. Nathan, tell me that you're maybe a little bit more optimistic than me.
I am. Here's the deal, though. When you dig into the numbers, and I'm a numbers guy, I'll be the first person, I'm sure many of you listening, you can pick that up by the type of podcast that we have here. The numbers are really bad. Okay, when you look at yards per play for his offenses over the last few years, the peak of the Walt Bell offensive experiment, his offensive career, happened when he was at Arkansas State back in the mid 2010s, 2014 and 2015. He had good offenses, top 40 in college football. J.D. McKissick is a player who made it to the NFL that was coached in some capacity by Walt Bell at Arkansas State. But since then, it's really gone downhill. You talk about tough times in Maryland as their offensive coordinator, at Florida State for a year, their offensive coordinator, then it's 3 years at UMass as their head coach. It's been a hard watch, okay? And make no mistake about it, one of the biggest confusions I remember a few years ago in the NFL was how did that Maryland offense that had Ty Johnson at running back and DJ Moore at wide receiver, how did they struggle so much? Well, the offensive coordinator for that Maryland offense was Walt Bell. But here's the deal. Here's where Tom Allen is buying in, I think. Tom Allen understands the resume. Here's his plan of attack. He's saying, I'm buying low on someone like Walt Bell. He struggled at UMass as their head coach. And make no mistake about it, somebody's head coaching career has little to no correlation with how good of a play caller they are. There's so much more that goes into head coaching in college football beyond play calling on a Saturday afternoon. So that's where I think Tom Allen, of course, somebody who emphasizes relationships more than almost every other coach in college football, Allen is saying, let me get in here on a 37-year-old offensive coordinator who runs a much different up-tempo, fast-paced offense and see where this takes us. Here's what I like about Walt Bell. And I said this on our podcast a few weeks ago, middle of the season, when it was clear IU's offense was not going to dig out of the vast crater that they dug themselves into.
Yes.
I said, I want an offensive coordinator that has group of five experience, because when you come to Indiana, you can't run a Michigan offense. You can't run a Georgia offense. You can't ground and pound the football, establish the run game, pound the rock, knock 'em, sock 'em football for 60 minutes. That doesn't work. At Indiana, the most successful offenses have been fireworks. They've been explosive plays. And if Walt Bell can instill a modicum of that, a part of that in his tenure at Indiana, it will have been a successful hire. This is not so much about his prior results. This is more about predicting what Walt Bell can do in this offense. He's got Power 5 experience, Group of 5 experience, and he's going to be motivated to redeem himself after a tough UMass tenure. So I'm not necessarily pitching you Walt Bell, but I think these are some of the things that Tom Allen saw. Time will tell if it actually pays off.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said.
So what would you have wanted? Like, what would you have wanted, man? You can either throw out a name or a particular type of resume you would have liked to see at IU. Of course, it's a job that's not all that inspiring right now after what happened last season. What would you have wanted as the new offensive coordinator in Indiana?
A guy that's improved offenses before. I'm not asking for a lot, I don't think, but like the resume of Walt Bell can't be worse. I mean, everywhere he's gone, the offense has gotten worse under him, and yet he still keeps getting jobs, which to me makes it sound like he's probably an easy guy to work with, which is, again, what you said about relationships and Tom Allen, which is fine. But this is a results-based business. You are hired to get your butt kicked out of the school eventually. Like, even the greatest coaches on earth are, sometimes just slowly phased out. Unless you're Nick Saban and you just keep getting better for some reason. Tom Allen, I don't know. Maybe he feels safe knowing he can take a risk here.
Maybe.
Which is good for him. But I don't think I don't see why you're taking a risk on this guy as opposed to probably any other positional coach you could have gotten from the Big Ten. Of course, this guy has play calling experience before, which is very helpful.
Yep.
But
he played wide receiver in college. He was a tight ends coach. He's been a wide receivers coach. He's been a quarterbacks coach. It's a very diverse resume. And what Tom Allen's going after is not so much the results, but the knowledge and education he's built over the last 10 years. What I'm looking forward to hearing now over the course of this week or whenever an official announcement is made is Tom Allen's thought process here. I'll give Tom Allen a chance to speak his mind, because make no mistake about it, I don't need to tell Indiana fans this after a 2-10 season. It's very possible that Tom Allen's legacy as Indiana's head coach hinges on how Walt Bell does as far as running this offense. Okay. 2 years ago, we were like, how good is Tom Allen exactly after that great 2019 season? Last year, like, Tom Allen is God. Build a statue. He can retire. He never has to buy a meal in Bloomington the rest of his life. And now you see where it's at, okay? The entire legacy, the entire reputation of Tom Allen as Indiana football coach, by and large, hinges on what happens in the 2022 football season.
Yeah.
And at least half of that is on the offensive side of the ball, where Indiana was absolutely anemic this past year. Now, let me ask you this, Matt. Are you surprised there have been no other personnel changes since the end of the season? Because so far, the only thing that's been reported is that the day after the season ended, Indiana got rid of Nick Sheridan. I know there's been a lot of public requests, a lot of public desire, commentary, messaging. It can't just be one guy after a 2-10 season, right? There have been frustrations with the offensive line, with the pass rush, the defense's inability to take the football away. Special teams made a bunch of mistakes. Okay, 2-10 doesn't fall on one guy. How surprised are you there have been no other personnel changes?
I'm not actually that surprised. I think, especially when it comes to offensive staff, whoever we were going to hire, right, and it ended up being Walt Bell. I assumed that they were going to bring in some of their guys. They were going to look through the staff that was there and kind of handpick who's staying and who's leaving. Like, I'm assuming Grant Hurd is going to stay. I'm assuming McCullough is going to stay.
Yep.
Kevin
Wright, tight ends coach. You've talked to him about him as a recruiting superhero on this Indiana staff coming from IMG Academy.
Right. So Hiller's probably the one guy gone. And then, as far as defensive staff and special team staff, I feel like you have all summer to figure that out.
I'm really surprised, Matt. I'm really surprised there haven't been one or two other changes on both sides of the ball, and I incorporate special teams into this too. Indiana had way too many problems last year for just one change to occur outside of the players on the team.
Yeah.
Okay, and I've said this the pros or in college football, a vastly underrated aspect of how good a head coach is the hiring and firing he does of the people who work for him, the assistants on his staff. It could be basketball, it could be football, it could be any sport. The head coach, it falls on his shoulders as far as making those personnel changes. If the head coach is retained, then we can talk about Darren Hiller, the offensive line coach. We can talk about a number of positional coaches. I think defensive backs coach underperformed. Defensive line was disappointing. Special teams was rough. I'm surprised only one change has been made. Now, could it be that a week from now or 2 weeks from now something happens? I don't know. We'll see. Of course, at Indiana HQ, we'll have all the updates that you need. Make sure you give us a follow on Twitter, Instagram, you name it. Man, a number of players have made decisions over the course of the last week. Indiana has seen a number of key defensive backs elect to return to the football program. Tywan Mullen, Devon Matthews, and Jalen Williams all have announced they're returning, whereas Micah McFadden, as well as Peyton Hendershot, have formally penned social media letters saying that they are on their way. Michael Penix Jr., Miles Marshall have entered their transfer portal as well. Anything catch your attention here, Matt? Any surprises? Indiana's going to have a much different looking football team next season.
Yeah, I mean, for the better or worse, that we will have a much different looking team. I think Penix leaving makes a lot of sense, especially with what the new offensive coordinator is. The offensive coordinator is probably going to want a more mobile quarterback than what Penix is shown to be able to do. But I don't think that's fair to Mike either, because I think Mike could be that quarterback. It's just he hasn't been healthy. And so for him, I'm actually kind of glad that he's transferring. Like we had really good moments with him. He showed really good promise, but I just don't. It was just not. It wasn't working, right? And sometimes things like just in like real life relationships, things aren't working. There are some circumstances that you just can't help, and you got to move on. And it's a tough decision, and cry a little bit, and then move on. So to Mike, we wish you the best, and we're gonna root for you wherever you go. And then as far as Miles Marshall goes, I'm a little surprised he's leaving, given the fact that we assumed he was going to be a huge part of the offense this year, and then didn't work out that way, and we got rid of the offensive coordinator that wasn't using him correctly, and he still decided to leave. But also, best of luck elsewhere. Everybody else going to NFL makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense.
So
Absolutely.
I don't think Peyton Hendershot's stock is going to be any higher than it is now.
Agreed. Completely agreed. Yeah.
And same thing for Mr.
Micah
Linebacker.
McFadden. Yeah.
Micah McFadden. Like his stock is never going to be higher than what it is right now. So
we also saw Ty Freifogel, Raheem Lane, as well as Ryder Anderson get selected to postseason college football draft scout type of games, all-star games. So you can definitely look forward to seeing them play. We talked about some changes as far as the roster is concerned. Well, on Sunday, Indiana landed 4 transfers. How about Ladarius Cox and Patrick Lucas out of Ole Miss, 2 guys that will make an impact in the trenches. Praise whatever God you believe in. Thank goodness that Indiana is going to add some weight in the trenches. I think Ryder Anderson was Indiana's best trench player last season. So a couple more Ole Miss guys come over. It's going to be interesting to see what Tom Allen's approach is specifically with Ladarius Cox. Patrick Lucas Jr. transfers in from Ole Miss. He's going to play defense, but Cox is somebody who started as a defensive lineman at Ole Miss and then switched to the offensive line room last summer. So will be interesting to see how the Hoosier coaching staff works with him. The incoming transfer I'm most excited about is linebacker Bradley Jennings, who's coming in from Miami, Florida. The Hurricanes, it seems like a like-for-like replacement, if you ask me. Jennings in, McFadden out. No one's expecting Jennings to record the numbers that McFadden did. That would be wildly disrespectful and unrealistic. Jeez. But you look at the physical build, you look at the skill set, you look at some of the instincts. Bradley Jennings does seem to be a similar match to Micah McFadden. And then you have North Carolina wide receiver Emery Simmons, who was a big play threat. If DJ Matthews returns next season for Indiana, we'll see what the redshirt implications are there. Simmons and Matthews could be a dynamic wide receiver combo for IU next year. So a lot to be excited about there. Real quick, Matt, I just wanted to ask you a couple predictions for Michael Penix Jr. and Miles Marshall. What type of program, what type of school do you think they're going to end up with at the start of next season?
Miles Marshall, I think he ends up at a Power 5 school. I think maybe even towards the top end, and he might end up being the third option on a team. Mm-hmm. So like I could see him going to, we just talked about Bailey Zappi and Western Kentucky. Now Western Kentucky's offensive coordinator went to Texas Tech. So Tech might be a school I could see something like Miles Marshall going to. Of course, he might end up back in Florida, whatever, Miami maybe, with new head coaching staff. But speaking of Florida, I'll give you an exact school that Penix is going to, because I think I know exactly where Penix is going. He's going to be a Knight. I think he's going to go to UCF.
Oh, that's an interesting prediction.
Because Dylan Gabriel's transferring.
He is.
From UCF. They're going to be looking for a QB. Penix is from Tampa.
Lefty QB.
Yeah, lefty QB.
Both.
Penix can run the ball a bit. And I think Gus Malzahn might take a look at him and think, hey, I took a transfer in Cam Newton, made him really good. Let me look at Mike Penix. But I'm serious. I think Penix is very much a candidate to end up in UCF.
I was thinking along the same lines, but for Penix, I was thinking Florida State. A school that recruited him coming out of high school. Definitely a school that could use some competent quarterbacking. And of course, Penix will be motivated going to FSU. I'm not so sure about Marshall. I was thinking about this earlier, which is why I asked. I could see him try to join a group of 5 conference as the number 1 option. Really get the targets, the routes, the balls going his way, especially in the red zone, where we saw him make some big catches over Michigan corners last year, and you see where Michigan is now. So very curious to see how things go. Last thing along those lines, Nick Sheridan, where do you see him catching on? Or you can say just move on.
Move on.
All right, great. We'll just move on then.
Good luck to him in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, Michael Penix Jr., what incredible memories Hoosier fans will hold of their former QB1, the leap to the pylon against Penn State. Not just the only one. So many other incredible performances, games, injury-riddled career. Penix will be remembered very fondly forever. I would be stunned, to say the least, if Penix, say, transferred to Cincinnati and the Hoosiers play the Bearcats next year, if Desmond Ridder takes that leap. Just brainstorming here, thinking aloud. Last question along the football lines, Matt. Your wish list, all right? Christmas time, holiday spirit, winter crisp in the air, except in Florida. Talk to me about the 1 or 2 things you're looking for as far as the rest of the football offseason for the IU football program.
Get signing day coming up soon, one of the early signing days. I'd like for us to maybe pull a couple of recruits from other people. Like you talked about Walt Bell's possible recruitment ability, especially in the South, is apparently what his specialty is. I would like for him to prove that immediately so that I feel much better about the hire. And then also transfer portal.
You're not kidding.
There are teams that have literally built themselves off the transfer portal. Michigan State being one of them. IU could do the same. They just have to find the right guys. And hopefully get a QB in. Because I know we have McCauley. I know we got Tuttle. But Penix leaving, I think finding another guy for the competition there. It doesn't have to be Spencer Rattler. It doesn't have to be him. But it's got to be a guy with a high pedigree and a former high recruiting ranking to come in and give the guys a little bit of a push to actually improve in the offseason. Because if you're just competing against the same guys over and over and over again, it's hard to really get motivated. It'd be good to get some fresh blood in that group.
Yep. I love Forrest Gray's comment in the live chat. He says, no more football talk, please. So we'll wrap it up. You stole my answer. I was going to say transfer portal. You got to hit it hard this upcoming off season. Look, the start of next year, Indiana's going to bring in a strong recruiting class. Of course, they're all going to be true freshmen. Strong recruiting class, though. And it's a much easier schedule next year. You start with a handful of easy games. So the sun will come up once again. We'll talk about football throughout the course of the offseason here on the Hoosier Sound. But let's switch gears here. It's time to talk some basketball. First, it's who won the week this past week in IU sports. And we're going to talk about an old friend. How about Al Durham, the Providence guard? He won Big East Player of the Week after a strong week for the Providence Friars. They're facing Vermont right now in a pretty interesting non-conference game. Vermont, one of the better mid-majors that you may not know about just yet, that you might want to pick for around a 64 upset when March comes around, just saying. But Durham continues to provide a steady presence for whatever team he goes to. He's doing just that for Providence out in the Big East. So congrats to Al Durham. He won the week this past week. An old friend. It's interesting to see all these former Hoosiers make a difference. Armand Franklin right now carrying the weight for Virginia, who would have a horribly disappointing season if it weren't for Franklin contributing on the court. So a lot of Hoosiers that used to play in Bloomington making a difference elsewhere. If you'd like to subscribe to our podcast for free, all you have to do is search for the Hoosier Sound wherever you listen to podcasts. Stay up to date with all of our information by following us on Twitter at Indiana HQ, as well as at the Hoosier Sound. This part is important. If you enjoy our show, leave us a review, tell a friend, share our links. Your support really helps us grow this podcast and reach more passionate IU fans such as yourself. Matt, on Saturday afternoon, Indiana knocked off Nebraska 68-55, but it wasn't without Nebraska taking a double-digit lead early in the first half and forcing IU to throw a couple of curveballs. But hey, Mike Woodson's a smart guy. He mentioned in the pregame availability on Friday that you were going to possibly see Anthony Leal regardless of how the game went. Little did we expect Leal to come in the heat of the moment, a baptism by fire. He knocked down a three, made a couple of key plays, sparked IU. Eventually, the Hoosiers won by double digits. Matt, talk about the Nebraska game. Indiana started Big Ten play 1-0. It was a win. They covered, but definitely some concerns throughout the day on Saturday.
Yeah, they just looked like it was a 12 o'clock tip on a Saturday in a home game, and they looked off. And they're allowed to have off games. We've seen them have a couple of them so far this year. I think the Syracuse game was an off game. You could probably chalk that up to being the first true road game with fans in attendance in like 2 years. And then the Eastern Michigan game was the first game of the season. So I think a step along the way, there's been some sort of excuse for having a bad game. And to be honest, I think Nebraska played well. I think they came out and they were just the better playing team for the first 10 minutes of the game. And then IU was like, wait, we're supposed to beat this. And that helps when you start making some outside shots and stop turning the ball over. They did that. Leal and Tawar Bates came in. I know you brought up Leal, who hit a three-pointer and looked fantastic in his minutes. By the way, somebody I said that should get minutes at the start of the year.
Yep.
Tamar looked fantastic. I thought Tamar looked great. Now, don't get me wrong, he looks good 98% of the time, and then 2% of the time he plays like a freshman. But he is a freshman. That's fine. We'll forgive him for doing so, because when he was playing well, he's one of the better players on the team. The two players I would like to point out for this performance that we didn't just mention was Miller Kopp and Trace Jackson-Davis. I thought Trace had a terrible game. Terrible game, in quotes. 14 points, 7 rebounds is terrible for Trace. It's not up to the standard that we hold him to. He did not play that way. And I'm sure he'd be the first one to tell you that he knows that. And then the second player is Miller Kopp with 0 points. Neither of them played well. I don't think Miller Kopp will have a 0-point game the rest of the season. I don't think Trace will have a 14-point game the rest of the season. And we still beat Nebraska by 13. So when people talk about, it was a slightly disappointing performance. One, we covered. Two, one of our starters didn't score when everybody else who came in, by the way, Durr, Geronimo, Leal, Finney, Bates, Johnson, Stewart, Thompson, and Davis. They all scored. The only person that didn't score was Miller Kopp. Didn't score a point. Looked awful. And Trace couldn't buy a bucket in the first half.
He also couldn't buy a foul, if you ask me. Neither him nor Xavier Johnson. I thought they are a really tough whistle. I'm not going to be as harsh on Jackson Davis. I mean, he still put up 3 steals and 4 blocks. I thought he was a real force inside on the other side of the court. Miller Kopp, though, that was hard to watch. Yes. And I'm not sure where that came from after how good he was against Syracuse last Tuesday night. That was really surprising. But it was funny when I was watching that game on Saturday, it didn't feel to me like, Indiana sort of, woke up. No, that's not what happened. Mike Woodson proactively made a change.
Yes.
Isn't it nice when you don't have to worry about the competence or the job security of your head coach? I mean, he flipped the switch. He pulled the lever. He said it's time for Anthony Leal, who barely played in the first handful of games this season. First, you got to give him credit for thinking about putting Leal in the game after Leal did not play in a second of the 50 minutes against Syracuse. Leal got the green light. Leal knew he was going to get minutes. And then Leal played for 10 straight minutes in the first half to dig Indiana out of a double-digit hole. That's the kind of curveball that was desperately missing from this team the last few years. Yep. The change of pace, the curveball. Fred Hoiberg is a smart coach at Nebraska. Nebraska might look horrible, and they're getting roundhoused by Michigan right now, but Hoiberg's a smart guy, and he would have spent the handful of days he had either before that 4 overtime game against NC State or even the 2 days between the NC State game and the Indiana game, looking at every trend, every pattern, every development of this IU basketball team. You know what he couldn't prepare for? Something he hadn't seen yet. And Anthony Leal getting the call was that curveball that honestly, you could make a very strong argument that curveball won Indiana the game on Saturday and avoided having a very, very, very ugly loss on its resume. Woodson did the same thing when he put Lander in against St. John's. He did that here. Leal against Nebraska was a huge change in the game plan, a huge curveball that helped Indiana win.
Yeah, I didn't think the offense was great. Defense was fantastic. I think holding them to 55 points, 22 in the first half, 33 in the second half. I think there was a bunch of points scored for Nebraska in the last 4 minutes. Really trying to mount a comeback, but it was really uncomebackable.
Yeah.
And we took a prospect in Bryce McGowan's that was scoring 18 a game, and held him to 8. And like I said, if those two, Bryce McGowan's and Alonzo Verge in the last podcast, I said they weren't scoring near their average of the year, that there's going to be a tough game. We're going to win the game. Yeah. McGowan's was 10 points under his average. Alonzo Verge, I think, was a point above his average. But that's fine. The plus minus on that is 7.
He also had 6 turnovers. Verge did. So even though you got some points, he turned it over 6 times.
Correct. So I think we did a fantastic job defending Nebraska on that end. Also, I feel like they were probably one of the easiest Big Ten teams we can face because they can't shoot. Watching them shoot is reminds me of watching the IU team last year. Terrible, awful. And so I don't think we played well on one side of the ball, and we came out sleepy and we won by 13. And I'll take that. But this kind of performance cannot happen against Purdue.
Oh my gosh. Well, it can't even happen against Wisconsin on Wednesday. We'll get to that in just a minute. First, it's time for a social media shout. And I just wanted to promote the different content we have over on our social media channels. At Indiana HQ, we have you completely covered: football, men's basketball, women's basketball. How about the IU women's basketball team? Only 2 losses this season, both the top 4 teams currently. The Hoosiers stay in the top 10 in the most recent AP poll and started Big Ten play with a 30-point win over Penn State. All the coverage you could possibly have. Great photos and videos from our boots on the ground with Colin Ebel. How about Jevin McCoskey, usually live tweeting and providing wonderful analysis from Assembly Hall whenever the Hoosiers play at home. Jevin, heck, he got to go to the Carrier Dome when IU faced Syracuse last week. So you better believe over at Indiana HQ, wherever you get your social media, on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, except for Instagram, Matt, where we're not Indiana HQ, but what are we?
Indiana.HQ.
That's right. And you can find us there, and we'll cover you wall to wall, whatever you need to know. Plenty of off-season changes happening for IU football. We're going to keep track of all of them going forward. Power rankings for basketball get updated almost on a daily basis over at indianahq.com, so you can get all of that action by following us on our social media channels. Matt, big game coming up on Wednesday. Indiana at Wisconsin. The Badgers are number 22 in the AP poll. The action tips off at 7 Eastern on Big Ten Network. And I regret to inform all of you that once again, Stephen Bardo will be providing color commentary, but this time it'll be Dave Revson doing play-by-play. So a little bit of a change up as far as the broadcast booth is concerned, but really it's just half a change up. Indiana's a 3.5 point underdog going into this contest. The over-under is 133. So if you do the math, it's something like a 68-65 final out in Madison. Ken Pom projects Wisconsin to win by 4, a 68-64 victory. The Badgers are the 26th ranked team in Ken Pom. Indiana is 30th. It is going to be a big battle of pace in this game. Indiana this year likes playing fast. The Hoosiers play fast this season, not rocket speed, but they play quick. Wisconsin, unsurprisingly, molasses speed on that side of the court. So, talk to me. Indiana at Wisconsin. The Hoosiers haven't won there since January 25th, 1998. There is not a single Hoosier scholarship player currently that was born the last time IU won there. Talk to me about this matchup.
Johnny Davis. That's Nebraska. Look, you know who Brad Davidson is. He's been there for 12 years. He's the Perry Ellis of the Big Ten at this point. But Johnny Davis is the new kid on the block. Well, not exactly new kid if you watched them Wisconsin play last year, but
Yeah.
the kid that is finally living up to his expectations. He's a sophomore, 6'5" guard from La Crosse, Wisconsin, and he averages 20 points per game on 40% shooting from three. He is an electric player for Wisconsin. He is basically their entire offense. And so guarding him is going to be the key to the game. If we can keep him, and I'll say it again, like we said last game,
Okay.
if you can keep him under 20 points this game, we're going to win the game. If you can keep him under 20, hold him to 15, that's fine. He's going to score because he's a very talented guard who can rebound very well, by the way, 5.6 rebounds per game.
Yeah.
He's a very talented guard, but if we can kind of disrupt him, like we've been able to disrupt shooters so far this year, if we can disrupt his rhythm, I feel like we're going to be in for a really fun game to watch in Madison. If he gets comfortable and is starting to take half-court shots, we're not going to be having a fun game.
It's never fun in Madison, Matt. It's
No.
never fun. Johnny Davis was the Maui Invitational Tournament MVP earlier in November. He won Big Ten Player of the Week in late November. He's one of those really long, rangy backcourt players. Similar in some aspects to Julian Champagny that Indiana faced with St. John's at the start of the season. They're not identical, but there are some similarities. So you can expect that to be the case. Wisconsin basically plays 9 players. They really love their starting lineup. A lot of new faces. In addition to Jonathan Davis and Brad Davison, 2 guys that you probably are familiar with. How about Tyler Wall, somebody who was at the end of the bench last year? He's a starter now. Chucky Hepburn is one of their starting guards, somebody who really likes to distribute the basketball. And Stephen Crowl is a kind of a stretch center, not too physical of a rebounder. Of course, he had 8 boards against Marquette on Saturday, but somebody who can step out, hit a long jumper. He's hit a couple threes in a few games this year. So Stephen Crowl, somebody to watch out for. And then they play 4 bench guys in a limited capacity. So that starting 5 is going to get the majority of the minutes. Looking forward to seeing that matchup take place. If you ask me, Matt, Indiana has to do what Indiana basketball has kind of done over the course of the program's history. Maybe not the last few years, but this year and, back before that, Indiana's got to make shots.
Yep.
Indiana's a better shooting team than Wisconsin.
Yep.
Indiana allows fewer made shots than Wisconsin does against their opponents. Go out, make some shots. And as far as Wisconsin's concerned, you got to contest the ones that they take and make sure you seal the rebounds, because honestly, I know this is oversimplifying the game of basketball, but if you ask me, that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah. Well, I would also add one more thing. Shots are important, but getting to the shots is also equally as important.
You can't turn it over 20 times.
Can't turn it over. And Wisconsin likes to force turnovers. Johnny Davis has 11 steals and Chucky Hepburn has 10. So their guards are going to try to get into the passing lanes and disrupt our flow on offense. Xavier Johnson has to play control of this game. He cannot let Wisconsin's antics get to him. As I know he's going to be mad at the officials. I can just picture it now. He's going to be mad. He's going to have a charge called against him. That's BS. And we all understand it. And it's because it's Wisconsin and Wisconsin cheats. I get it. It's fine. That's Wisconsin basketball. But he needs to play control and he needs to control his emotions a little bit. It's fine to be frustrated, but you can't then allow that frustration to get into your play. And that's something we've seen that happen quite often this year. And that's kept him from getting on the court because he keeps getting in foul trouble, or he turns the ball over 3 straight possessions in a row. Neither of which can happen in Madison tomorrow. So look out for that. So on the defensive end, Johnny Davis. By the way, how does Johnny Davis lead them in assists per game, steals per game, and rebounds per game?
It's very Champagny-like, very sort of versatile range, 6'5", ball handler, shooter, all those things.
So John Davis on the defensive end, turnovers and shot making on the offensive end. Tell me if that sounds familiar. There's a
basketball, baby.
There's a very similar game plan for almost every single game for IU. Stop the good dude and make shots and don't give them the ball.
Simple. I think it's extra important in this game. And that's the point I want to make very clear for those of you listening here, likely on, Wednesday morning or Wednesday afternoon. It is extremely important in this game that IU does exactly those things. Of course, Brad Davison's going to try to make a difference in a supporting role as well. Wisconsin has played 6 straight high major opponents. They've won 5 of them. The loss was to Providence back on November 15th at Kohl Center. They forced 15 turnovers against Providence. They forced 16 against Texas A&M. They forced 16 against St. Mary's. And as we alluded to somewhat, when Jonathan Davis won Maui Invitational Tournament MVP, the Badgers won the tournament with 3 wins over Texas A&M, Houston, and St. Mary's. I'm just going to tell you this: if Indiana wins the turnover battle, they win the game. I think it's that simple. If whether you want to force some out of the Wisconsin, they don't turn it over. They force a lot of turnovers. Indiana gives the ball away a lot. If Indiana can overcome that and win the turnover matchup, they're going to win this game. Matt, give me a prediction. Who wins, by how much, and what Hoosier player do you want to see step up? You said Xavier Johnson. Is there anyone else you're looking for?
Yeah, I'm not going to sit here and predict a IU victory. In fact, I remember saying that, well, actually, I think I said in the preview that this was the year that we win at Wisconsin, but then Wisconsin ended up turning out to be much better than I thought. So I am going to predict 69-68.
Oh, no.
Wisconsin in a heartbreaker, but it'll look good on IU's resume because people are very high on Wisconsin, and losing by 1 point on the road to Wisconsin is what is that, a tier 1 loss?
It's a quad 1.
Quad 1 loss. We'll take a quad 1 loss at Wisconsin. I don't think this is the year that we break it, but I'd love to be proven wrong. Also, the IU player, I forgot about the IU player. IU player needs to step up is Trace. Trace needs to have a much better performance. He needs to carry the load on offense this game.
Absolutely. It's a big game for Indiana, Matt, because you know how considerably the selection committee values road victories against good teams, right? Indiana didn't get theirs in Syracuse, and Syracuse is a weird environment. I get it. But if Indiana doesn't win at Wisconsin, here are their following road games coming up. January 2nd at Penn State. Penn State's not good. January 13th at Iowa. Okay. Decent opponent there. You might like a good road win there. January 17th at Nebraska. Nebraska's bad. January 29th at Maryland. Maryland's bad.
It's awful.
And then you get into February 8th at Northwestern. Northwestern, we'll see. And then February 12th at Michigan State. Indiana's not got too many big road opportunities until mid-February rolls around.
Yep.
So I think the Hoosiers come out with a lot of focus and a lot of sharpness. I think IU's aware of that note. And I think you're going to try to come out in Madison, a place where they can establish a little bit of immortality. If they can break this 23-year-long slump. And of course, the carrot at the end of the stake, there are a lot of carrots at the end of this game, to be honest, if Indiana goes out and wins. But you could find yourself ranked in the top 25 when next Monday rolls around, going on the road to beat a top 25 team. So maybe we'll see what happens, but you only get closer rather than further away with the win at Wisconsin. So with that said, I think Indiana's going to come out with a win. I've got this at 66-61 in favor of the Hoosiers. I think Wisconsin's overachieving just a little bit. They might look past Indiana to this road game they have in Columbus coming up this weekend against the Buckeyes. So I've got the Hoosiers coming away with a win in Madison. We did ask all of you in our podcast poll, which side of the ball are you going to focus on when the Hoosiers take on the number 22 Wisconsin Badgers in Madison? And the poll's been up for not even an hour. Over 100 votes have poured in. 61% of you say offense. 39% of you say defense. And I know our good friend Jevin, who covers the Hoosiers for Indiana HQ, says he wants to let everyone know how important he thinks the offense is going to be in this game. IU averages nearly 80 points. Whoever finishes this game with less turnovers will win it. So that's what Jevin's thoughts are. Matt, as we wind down on this Tuesday night, what are your final thoughts as IU football making a lot of changes? The basketball program staying the course, 7-1, things to fix, but overall, you'll take it.
Yeah, of course I'll take it. This is what I predicted would happen so far this year. I told you that our one loss would come to at Syracuse. Syracuse cheats just as Wisconsin cheats. So
everyone cheats.
Everyone cheats. No, Purdue's cheating. Wisconsin definitely, like, they play like little children. Oh. And I don't like the way Wisconsin plays, and I don't like their head coach, and I don't like Brad Davidson. He took Tyra Buss away from us, and
R.I.P.
Yeah, so beat Wisconsin.
Beat Wisconsin. Yeah, I mean, Indiana has not won there in 24 years. In almost 24 years. That's an unbelievable number. And I'm going to tell you this, right? You know, could Indiana and Wisconsin be in a Big Ten tight race as we get into March? Of course, if that's the case, well, those tiebreakers come into play, and Indiana winning this game could make a difference. It's the next best test for this IU basketball team. And for the Hoosiers football program, I mean, look, you're only as good, any business, even outside of sports, right? Any business is only as good as its leaders. And Tom Allen's got work to do this offseason, and his first priority was finding Indiana's offensive coordinator. I still think Tom Allen deserves the benefit of the doubt. I'm curious to hear his thought process when he meets the media to introduce Walt Bell as the school's next offensive coordinator. No date or time has been announced for that session, but when it happens, you better believe at Indiana HQ, we will be covering it. But that about wraps it up for our 227th show of the Hoosier Sound, 229th show of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your support. Thank you to our live audience. You're all beautiful people. To hear more fantastic episodes like the one you heard today, be sure to follow us at Indiana HQ and at the Hoosier Sound to make sure you don't miss any in the future. You can also go to our website, indianahq.com, to find everything in one place. But as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation. We will see you next time.